Okay, so ChatGPT, it's everywhere, right? Every conversation, every news feed, it feels like this AI just kind of like, bam, appeared out of nowhere, and now everyone's suddenly an expert. So today we're gonna take a deep dive and really understand what ChatGPT is, what it can do, and what it might mean, for all of us.
Yeah, and it's not just, another another shiny new tech thing.
Yeah.
ChatGPT represents a real shift in what AI can do,
Yeah.
especially with these chatbots. We're talking about going way beyond, the same old automated responses and doing things that are much more dynamic and versatile.
Yeah, and when you look at like what it actually is, it's kind of astonishing. It's an advanced AI chatbot from
Yeah.
OpenAI, but I was reading some of the stuff we've been looking at, and it's described like almost as a really smart friend who's also like your super efficient personal assistant,
Yeah.
who also happens to be like really creative, can write all kinds of things and explain stuff and help you brainstorm and even like crack a joke here and there. Maybe not the best jokes yet, but you know,
And what's really interesting is how it does all that, the engine that makes it work.
yeah.
It's all powered by what's called a massive neural network. It's like, imagine training a dog with just tons and tons of examples of a command. This network has been fed like a crazy amount of text, like billions of words from all over the internet, and this lets it learn all these intricate relationships between words and phrases.
Okay, so neural network, when you say that, I mean, is that literally like a brain with connections?
Well, it's a very, very complex network, and each part of the network is like a switch.
Yeah.
And these switches can adjust their connections,
Mm-hmm.
based on the data they process. So the more data it gets, the better it gets at recognizing patterns, just like our brains, learn through experience. But it's not actually thinking like we do, right?
Okay.
It's more about spotting these patterns and predicting the sequence of words that are most likely to come next, right?
Well,
Whether it's a conversation or a piece of writing.
right. So it's not actually thinking. It's just like really, really good at predicting.
Exactly. It's not conscious. It doesn't understand in the human sense, but it can analyze all that data and find these statistical links between words. And that's how it creates text that often sounds, really coherent and almost human.
Which makes sense why it's become such a big deal, right? It's not just like some, passing fad. It seems like it could actually be useful for things.
Yeah.
So what's behind this popularity? Why is everyone so excited about ChatGPT right now?
I think there are a few things going on. First, it's very easy to use.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone can start using it right away, unlike some other AI tools, which are more complicated. And then second, it's incredibly versatile. We've talked about this, but it can be used for so many things: answering questions, drafting emails, writing content, even more.
Yeah, it definitely feels like way more than just a regular chatbot. You're not
Yeah.
getting those same old robotic responses. It actually feels pretty natural, and the level of detail is surprising.
Yeah, and that comes from the sheer amount of text it was trained on, billions of words. And that gives it a really rich context and lets it understand all these subtleties in language that simpler chatbots just totally miss. And, like you said, it's not human, but it's so good at predicting these text sequences that it really feels like it understands.
Okay, so we've got a handle on what ChatGPT is and why everyone's making such a big deal about it. But what's really interesting is how people are actually using it in the real world, and some of these examples are pretty surprising.
Yeah, for sure. It really shows, the impact it's having, not just the theoretical possibilities, but like what people are doing with it right now.
So let's talk about a few of these examples. One of the first ones that stood out to me was this idea of AI-powered business owners. I mean, apparently there are entrepreneurs who are using ChatGPT for pretty much everything, like handling customer questions, writing marketing copy, even like generating content for their websites and social media. Is pretty amazing.
It is, and it really shows how efficient and versatile it can be, especially for, smaller companies, for solo entrepreneurs or small teams. It's like having an extra set of hands that can do all these tasks that would normally require, hiring more people or spending a lot of time on things that are very repetitive.
And then there was one that I was like, wait, what? And this was the dating with ChatGPT. I saw some articles about people using AI to help them, with flirting and writing those first messages and even like building relationships, which feels kind of crazy.
It really does, and it makes you think about, how much of our interactions are going to be shaped by AI in the future.
Yeah.
What does it even mean for a relationship to be authentic if AI is involved? It's a pretty big question.
And then this one just blew me away. The AI lawyer, someone used ChatGPT to write legal defenses, and
Yeah.
apparently it actually worked in court. I mean, that's a huge leap from, just generating some text.
It is, and it shows that AI could be really useful in these highly specialized fields like law. I don't think it's going to replace lawyers anytime soon, but it could definitely become a tool for research and drafting documents and even, outlining arguments. Of course, accuracy and reliability
Yeah.
are really important in those situations.
Of course. And then we can't forget the AI rap battles, people using ChatGPT to write diss tracks and, participate in online rap battles, which is kind of funny, but it shows that, this technology can be used for fun and entertainment too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's really adaptable. You can use it for serious stuff. You can use it for fun and games. And I think it's really interesting how people are just experimenting with it in so many different ways.
Yeah, these examples really make you stop and think about a bigger picture. If AI is already this capable, what's next? What are the long-term implications of all this?
Right? That's the big question. As AI becomes more integrated into our lives, we need to think critically about, the impact it's going to have, both the good and the bad, the opportunities and the challenges.
And one of the big concerns I think for a lot of people is about jobs. Will AI eventually take over human jobs? And the research we've been looking at actually has a pretty interesting perspective on this.
It does. It acknowledges that some jobs are going to change. Especially jobs that involve a lot of repetitive tasks like customer service, writing,
Yeah.
even some types of programming. AI is getting really good at these things.
But it also pushes back against this idea that, robots are going to take all our jobs. And it really focuses on this idea of AI as a tool that can actually make our work better instead of replacing us completely. Can you
Right.
talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So the idea is that AI can help us do our jobs better. Instead of just automating tasks out of existence, it can handle the boring stuff, the time-consuming stuff, and then that frees up humans to focus on the things that require creativity and critical thinking and,
Hmm.
those uniquely human skills like empathy and complex problem solving. It's not just about automation. It's about this idea of symbiotic intelligence.
Yeah, I like that symbiotic intelligence. I mean, like, for example, think about doctors using AI to help diagnose patients. That frees up the doctor to spend more time, actually talking to the patient and providing more personalized care, which is something that maybe they didn't have as much time for before.
Exactly. And the research had some other interesting examples, like talking about how writers can use AI
Mm.
to become like superhuman writers. They can produce content much faster.
Yeah, I saw that they can use AI to, help with research and generate first drafts and even edit, and that lets them be more productive and focus on, the more creative parts of their work.
Right? It's about working with AI to amplify your own abilities.
And on the business side, the research suggested that companies that use AI effectively might actually grow faster, which could lead to, new jobs, even as some old jobs change.
Right. And that's an important point throughout history. New technologies have always changed the job market. Some jobs disappear and new jobs are created. And I think AI is going to be similar.
Mhm.
We're going to need people who can develop and manage AI systems and people who can use AI to, do their jobs better.
So the takeaway here is that we don't need to be afraid of AI. We need to learn how to work with it so that we can thrive in the future.
Exactly. Adapt and be willing to learn new skills that work well with AI. That's going to be really important going forward.
Now, there's a lot of talk about AI out there, and not all of it is accurate. There's a lot of hype and speculation, and the research we've been looking at actually takes the time to debunk some common myths about AI. So let's talk about a few of those.
Yeah, it's important to address those myths because they can cause a lot of anxiety and prevent people from really understanding, what AI can and can't do.
So myth number one, AI is going to become self-aware and like take over the world, destroy humanity. It's like something out of a movie, right? So
Yeah.
what's the reality here?
Well, the truth is that AI, like ChatGPT, is nowhere near being self-aware or conscious. Like the research said, AI isn't conscious. It's just predicting text. No Skynet. Yet it's important to remember that, it's really good at mimicking human language, but it doesn't actually have feelings or intentions or, a desire to rule the world.
Right, so it's not like some evil mastermind. It's just a really sophisticated pattern recognition machine.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
all based on the data it was trained on and the algorithms that guide its responses.
Myth number two, AI is stealing creativity. And this is a big one for artists and musicians and writers. So what's the real story here?
Well, the research actually suggests that AI can be a really valuable tool for creative people. It can help them come up with new ideas, overcome writer's block, and even produce content more efficiently.
Mm.
It talks about this idea of AI-assisted filmmaking,
Hmm.
where AI is actually part of the creative process.
So it's more like a collaboration than a competition.
Exactly. AI can handle some of the more technical or repetitive parts of the creative process, and that frees up human artists to, focus on the big picture, the emotions, the things that make their work unique.
Okay. And the final myth, AI always tells the truth. This seems especially important now that people are starting to rely on AI for information more and more.
It is, and it's
Mm.
really important to understand that AI doesn't actually know facts. It generates text based on patterns it's learned from data, and that data can sometimes be wrong or biased. So it's crucial to double check any information you get from AI, especially if it's important.
So don't just blindly trust everything ChatGPT tells you. Think critically and do your own fact checking.
Exactly. AI is a powerful tool, but it's not perfect.
This has been really eye-opening, but, for you, the listener, sitting there thinking about how all of this applies to your own life, the big question that the research asks is, should you start using ChatGPT?
And based on everything we've talked about, the answer is probably yes,
Yeah.
especially if you're in business or content creation or marketing, or if you're trying to learn new skills. AI tools like ChatGPT can really help you be more efficient and productive and even more creative.
And the research really emphasized how fast the world is changing, and it suggests that the people who embrace these new technologies like AI are going to be the ones who succeed, while the people who ignore them might get left behind.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Learning to use AI as a tool and incorporating it into your work can give you a real advantage and open up all sorts of new possibilities. But if you ignore it, you might miss out on some big opportunities.
And the research actually ends with a challenge for the listener to try using ChatGPT for something creative this week. Just
Yeah.
experiment with it, play around with it, see what it can do.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. The best way to understand a new technology is to actually use it, get some hands-on experience.
So after this deep dive into ChatGPT, we've talked about what it is, how people are using it, the truth about those job displacement fears, the myths about AI, and how you can actually use it for yourself.
Mm.
Here's a final thought. Now that, all this, what's one thing in your own life, maybe a task or a project where you think ChatGPT could give you a new perspective or a new advantage?
That's a great question for everyone to think about.